The first time I stood on Mountain Pass Road, I remember thinking, this was the kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. Sabre Springs sits tucked in the northeastern corner of San Diego, clean, orderly, suburban. You could throw a frisbee across half the neighborhood without hitting anything but trimmed lawns and beige stucco. The kind of place where mailboxes still stood straight and basketball hoops never rusted. A little too perfect, if you ask me. The Van Dam family fit right in. Damon, a software engineer, worked long hours but always made time for his kids. Brenda, a stay-at-home mom, was warm, energetic, and busy. PTA meetings, school runs, dinners on the table. They had 3 children, 2 boys, Derek and Dylan, and their only daughter, 7-year-old Danielle Van Dam. Brown hair, hazel eyes, a gap-toothed smile that seemed to always be mid-laugh. She was a spark in every room she walked into. At school, her teachers said she was bright. At home, she was the heartbeat. The kind of kid who left glitter in her wake, literally. I saw it on her bedroom carpet. On January 31st, 2002, a Thursday night, everything seemed normal. The boys were asleep. Danielle had gone to bed in her second-floor bedroom, down the hall from her brothers. Damon was home, watching TV. Brenda had plans with friends, a night out at Dad's, a local bar about 5 minutes away. It wasn't unusual. She kissed Danielle goodnight before heading out around 8:30 p.m. At the bar, Brenda met up with a few girlfriends. They drank, they talked, they danced. It was casual, local crowd, nothing rowdy. A few acquaintances joined them later, including one man who lived just 2 doors down from the Van Dams. A quiet guy, polite, a bit stiff. His name was David Westerfield. By around 2 a.m., Brenda came home, not alone. A few of the friends tagged along for a nightcap. Damon was still up. The alarm system had gone off, a blinking light on the control panel. Brenda noticed the garage door had been left open. Strange, but not alarming. She reset the panel. The guests stayed for a few minutes, then left. Damon and Brenda went to bed. Sometime during the night, Damon got up again. The alarm panel was blinking. This time, the door to the backyard was open. He closed it, checked the locks, but he didn't check the kids. After all, what were the odds? That was the last time Danielle Van Dam was seen alive. The next morning, around 9:39 a.m., Brenda went to wake her daughter. Danielle wasn't in her bed. The sheets were pulled back, the pillow dented. But no child. At 9:42 a.m., she called 911. That phone call marked the beginning of a story that would unravel Sabre Springs, fracture a family, and leave a permanent scar on a city used to sun, surf, and safety. At the time, I was working out of Los Angeles, but by nightfall, I was on the road heading south, toward a house with wind chimes on the porch and a pink scooter in the driveway. I didn't know what I would find, but I knew one thing. No one just disappears from a place like Sabre Springs. Not unless someone opens a door and doesn't close it again. When a child goes missing, there's a silence that follows. Not a peaceful one, a pressure, a vacuum, as if the air itself holds its breath. February 1st, 2002, began like any other morning in Sabre Springs. Coffee makers hummed. Kids got dressed for school. Dogs barked down neat sidewalks. But inside the Van Dam home, that rhythm shattered at 9:39 a.m. Brenda climbed the stairs to wake Danielle. Her bedroom sat at the end of the hall, pale purple walls, stuffed animals on the shelves. The bed was empty. At first, Brenda assumed Danielle had wandered off, maybe downstairs, maybe into her brother's room. But she wasn't anywhere. The panic didn't come all at once. It crept in, a growing wrongness. The sheet pulled back. Her favorite slippers still by the bed. No noise. No giggle. Nothing. 3 minutes later, at 9:42, Brenda called 911. The dispatcher asked standard questions. When did you last see her? Is it possible she left the house? Are you sure? Yes. Yes. Absolutely. By 10 a.m., officers were at the house. Within the hour, Sabre Springs had its first missing child case in years, and one that wouldn't stay quiet for long. I arrived early that afternoon. The neighborhood was already cordoned off. Police cruisers idled. Neighbors stood in driveways, holding their kids a little tighter. Some looked angry, others scared, all of them confused. I talked to one volunteer as they handed out flyers. Middle-aged woman, local, wearing a yellow vest and holding a stack of printer paper. 7 years old, she said, handing me a flyer. Went missing from her own bed. That's not supposed to happen here. The community mobilized fast. Volunteers combed parks, cul-de-sacs, drainage ditches. Police knocked on every door in a 3-block radius. Helicopters scanned from above. Dogs were brought in. Danielle's photo, smiling, freckles, front teeth missing, was suddenly everywhere. The Van Dams opened their home to investigators. Damon and Brenda were interviewed separately. There were rumors, whispers. Why didn't they check on the kids when the alarm went off? Why were there people over so late? I watched as the public sympathy started to split. Not fully, not loudly, but enough. Some thought the parents were careless. Others said they were grieving. Everyone had an opinion, and most of them had nothing to do with facts. Inside the command post, detectives laid out their timeline. The alarm system had registered multiple door openings that night. Garage, backyard, side gate. No signs of forced entry. No broken windows. Just doors left open. By Sunday, the search had expanded beyond the neighborhood. Volunteers began combing the deserts east of San Diego. Remote canyons, hiking trails, miles of open land, and no sign of Danielle. I remember walking one of those trails with a group of volunteers. The sun was punishing. The silence out there was different, vast, unforgiving. You could walk for hours without hearing anything but your own breath and the crunch of gravel underfoot. One woman next to me suddenly stopped and whispered. It's like she vanished into the ground. Maybe she had. That night, I stood outside the Van Dam home. The porch light was on. A candle flickered in the window. Reporters crowded the street. Cameras blinked red. Inside that house, a mother and father were sitting in silence. And down the hall, a little girl's room was still exactly as she left it. Unmade bed. Slippers by the side. Glitter in the carpet. Every neighborhood has one. The quiet neighbor. The one who keeps to himself. Lawn's always neat. Blinds usually down. Polite, but distant. In Sabre Springs, that was David Westerfield. 50 years old, divorced, mechanical engineer. 2 doors down from the Van Dams. He lived there for a while, but no one seemed to know him well. He wasn't unfriendly, just not around much. A wave here, a nod there. That was about it. But on the Saturday morning Danielle vanished. The same morning Brenda made that 911 call. Something about David caught a neighbor's attention. He was washing his SUV. Not just a rinse. A deep clean, hours long, meticulous. Scrubbing the carpet, wiping down the inside of the doors, even using a steam cleaner. In a neighborhood where a weekend car wash meant hosing off dust, it stood out. Especially that day. I remember talking to one neighbor, a father of 3. He looked at me and said, when a little girl goes missing 2 houses away, and you spend 6 hours cleaning your car? That's not normal. The cops thought so too. Westerfield wasn't home when investigators first knocked. He had, according to him, left town early Saturday morning, hours after Danielle went missing, to go camping alone in his motorhome. He said he'd driven east, toward the desert, stopped at Silver Strand Beach, then headed into the Imperial County backcountry. No phone, no GPS, no receipts. Just driving. He returned home Monday morning. And within hours, detectives were on his doorstep. When they interviewed him, something didn't sit right. His timeline was fuzzy. His mood too calm. And when asked if he had any contact with the Van Dams recently, he admitted seeing Brenda at Dad's bar just 2 nights earlier. He remembered what she was wearing. He remembered a hug. That hug, and his focus on it, would raise more eyebrows than anything he said about his weekend trip. The investigators left with more questions than answers. But now, they had a name, a face, and a growing suspicion. On Tuesday, they got a warrant. They searched his house, his motorhome, his SUV. They took clothes, computers, bedsheets, floor mats. They vacuumed fibers, scraped under fingernails, bagged what they could. They didn't tell us exactly what they found at first, but they didn't have to. The look on one detective's face said enough. Something wasn't right. I waited outside Westerfield's house that afternoon. It looked like every other house on the street, trimmed bushes, 2-car garage, wind chimes by the door. But suddenly, it felt off. Like the music had stopped playing, but no one had noticed until now. One detail stuck with me. On the windshield of his RV, someone had written, "Why?" in the dust. I remember tracing it with my finger. The question hung in the air like smoke. Inside, investigators kept collecting. Outside, reporters whispered. And somewhere, out past the suburbs and the desert line, a little girl was still missing. It was the kind of case where evidence doesn't shout, it whispers. And you have to know how to listen. When forensic teams went through David Westerfield's motorhome, They weren't expecting anything obvious. No fingerprints on a weapon. No hidden compartments. What they were looking for was smaller. Invisible, even. And they found it. A single orange fiber on the carpet. A strand of hair near the mattress. Blood, not pooled or smeared, but flecked, microscopic, trapped in the fibers of the upholstery. Too small for the naked eye, but not for science. The first DNA test came back quietly. Confirmed, the hair belonged to Danielle Van Dam. Then the blood, that too, matched her DNA profile. Not in massive amounts, but enough. Enough to suggest she'd been there. Enough to suggest she hadn't left on her own. I remember standing outside the forensics lab in Kearney Mesa the night the test results came in. The parking lot was mostly empty. One tech came out to smoke. I asked him, "Did you find anything?" He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "There's no way she wasn't in that RV." They also found fingerprints, small ones, on the cabinet near the bed in the motorhome. Later matched to Danielle. The case, which had begun in whispers, was beginning to build a voice. Back at Westerfield's house, things got darker. In the laundry, traces of bleach. In the trash, paper towels with what appeared to be faint reddish-brown stains. His computer? It told its own story. Encrypted files, downloads, dozens of images that were illegal, disturbing, undeniable. Material involving minors. Westerfield was brought in again for questioning. He came with scratches on his arms and hands. When asked, he blamed a tree branch. Or maybe his dog. He wasn't sure. Detectives were sure of one thing. This man was hiding something. The public didn't know the full story yet, but it didn't matter. By February 5th, David Westerfield was arrested, charged with kidnapping and murder. That afternoon, I stood at a press briefing outside San Diego Police Headquarters. Reporters pressed forward. Microphones leaned in. The police spokesperson said what everyone had waited days to hear. "We have a suspect in custody." But no one cheered. No relief. No victory. Because Danielle was still missing. And without a body, even the strongest evidence felt like a ghost in the room. For the next 3 weeks, San Diego turned into a city holding its breath. Volunteers kept searching, refusing to stop. Highways, canyons, trails, abandoned buildings. Nothing. Then came February 27th. 2 volunteers, civilians, were walking a brushy trail near Dehesa Road, east of El Cajon. It was dry, remote. The kind of place no one visits unless they're looking for something or trying to hide it. They found what the police had not, a small, decomposed body curled beneath scrub and leaves. It was naked, abandoned, weathered by sun and time. And though they didn't say her name right away, we all knew. It was Danielle. By the time they found her, no one was talking about innocence anymore. Not publicly, at least. The forensic case against David Westerfield was tight, airtight, some said. Danielle's blood in his motorhome. Her hair on his bedding. Her fingerprints inside. The illegal images on his computer. The scratches. The inconsistencies. The bleach. But the more the pieces fell into place, the more something inside me pulled away. Because when everything fits too perfectly, too quickly, I've learned to squint. The prosecution said Westerfield entered the Van Dam home through the open garage door while Brenda was out and Damon was asleep. They said he walked through the house, into Danielle's room, picked her up, and walked out, unnoticed. No sound. No alarm that stopped him. No neighbor who saw him. In a house with 3 children and an active alarm system. It wasn't impossible. But it wasn't clean either. Then there was the motive. The theory went like this. Westerfield was obsessed with Brenda. He had seen her at the bar that Thursday night, maybe misread her friendliness, maybe expected something more. When that didn't happen, he went home, stewed, and returned a few hours later to take her daughter. But when I interviewed Brenda weeks later, she was adamant. "I barely knew him," she told me. "We weren't friends. We weren't anything." Her tone wasn't angry, it was exhausted. Like she'd been defending herself from a narrative she hadn't written. In the house itself, there were questions there too. Police records showed the alarm had triggered several times that night. Doors opened, then closed. Yet Damon didn't check the kids. He just went back to sleep. That didn't make him guilty of anything. But it added a layer of static, a background hum of uncertainty. Westerfield's defense team latched onto all of this. They argued that the investigation had tunnel vision from the start, that once Westerfield emerged as a suspect, police stopped looking anywhere else. Other tips were ignored. Potential leads went cold. One in particular stood out, a known sex offender who lived in the area, arrested weeks later for unrelated charges, whose movements that weekend were never fully accounted for. He was never named in court, but I saw his name in an early tip sheet, redacted, forgotten. Why? The defense pushed this in court, said the evidence could have been contaminated, that Westerfield's motorhome had been left unguarded for over 24 hours before testing, plenty of time for cross-contamination, deliberate or accidental. They didn't argue that Danielle hadn't died, just that the path to conviction had been paved too neatly. And that made me pause, because I'd been on too many stories where certainty turned into error, where the obvious suspect wasn't the right one, where truth was drowned by narrative. By then, though, it didn't matter. The court wasn't swayed. On August 21, 2002, David Westerfield was found guilty on all counts: kidnapping, murder in the first degree, and possession of child pornography. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just sat there, still as a stone. But outside that courtroom, the air hadn't cleared. There were still things unsaid, still timelines that didn't match, still questions that didn't settle right. And for all the doors that had been left open that night, in the house, in the story, in the investigation, it felt like none of them had truly closed. Not really. Some stories end with a verdict. This one didn't. When Judge William Mudd read the sentence on January 17, 2003, the courtroom was silent. Not dramatic silence, exhausted silence. David Westerfield stood motionless as he was sentenced to death. No reaction. No words. Brenda and Danielle Van Dam sat just feet away. They didn't flinch. They had lived every second of this case twice, once in real time and once in cross-examination. They didn't cry that day, at least not in front of us. Outside, reporters delivered live stand-ups and clipped tones. Justice served, they said. But justice, like grief, doesn't follow a script. After the trial, the Van Dams tried to return to something like life. They moved, changed their phone numbers. Brenda began speaking publicly about child safety. Damon went quieter. The boys grew up, slowly, in the long shadow of what was lost. I revisited Sabre Springs that spring. The house on Mountain Pass Road still stood. New family. Fresh coat of paint. The pink scooter was gone. The wind chimes were gone. Even the mailbox was different. But the street didn't sound the same. I stopped a few doors down, Westerfield's old place. It was for sale again. The grass was overgrown. Shutters hanging crooked. No one wanted to talk about it. I did anyway. I called one of the original detectives. I asked if anything ever felt unfinished. He paused, then said, "It was the strongest case I've ever worked. But it didn't feel clean. Not the way it should have." I knew what he meant. Even with the evidence, even with the conviction, there's something that clings to this case, something that won't let go. The body was found 25 days after she vanished. In the open, off a trail near Dehesa Road. The autopsy couldn't determine an exact cause of death. Her body was too far gone. But it showed she'd likely died within hours of being taken. That meant for weeks, while thousands searched, while parents held vigils, while reporters filled airtime, Danielle had already been gone. The desert had kept her secret longer than any human could. And maybe that's what haunts me most. I've covered fires, shootings, terror attacks. But this one, this quiet, suburban crime stays lodged in a place I can't shake. Because it wasn't about rage, or chaos, or desperation. It was about someone opening a door that never should have opened. And a little girl, fast asleep in her bed, who never had the chance to say no. That's the dead zone. Not the crime scene. Not the courtroom. It's what's left after the story ends, the part you carry with you.